Here's what's coming up on episode 124 of the Big Seance Podcast, the return of Kristy Robinett.
The real world and even the afterlife isn't so love and light. And I wanted it to be positive and comforting, but I wanted to bring up some of the things that we kind of stuff in the closet, like people who have had suicides in their family and have been raised in the religious household like I was in a parochial household, which was, we were taught that anyone that committed suicide immediately was a fast pass to hell, or those that had terminations or miscarriages, or what happens if their family member is a murderer or if their family member is murdered. All of these, kind of hairy topics. I sat down and I said, I really want to write about them. And I want to tell the stories from the spirit's perspective. And that's what I did with this book.
Welcome to the Big Seance Podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Remember Danielle M. Holdman from episodes 90 and 91 of the podcast? Danielle and I both got some great feedback from many of you after those episodes. Well, I recently had the pleasure of being invited into Danielle's Parlor for her podcast, The Coaching Parlor. We hit on some points that you've probably not heard me talk about on this show. We talked about myths of the paranormal and the occult, along with that word occult itself, and how that tends to confuse people. We talked about healthy skepticism and our spiritual journeys. I'll put the link in the show notes for this episode, but you can find it at danielleholdman.com. Oh, and guess what? Are you an Android user? The Big Seance Podcast is now on the brand new Google Podcasts app, so you might want to check that out. That link will be in the show notes too. Are you ready to pour some tea? Kristy Robinett is a professional psychic medium. In addition to giving readings and teaching workshops, she uses her psychic skills to assist with police investigations. Kristy lectures across the country and has appeared on the ID channels Restless Souls, Fox News, ABC News, and Coast to Coast. She is also the author of Forevermore, Guided in Spirit by Edgar Allan Poe, Messenger Between Worlds, True Stories from a Psychic Medium, which we talked about the last time Kristy was on the show. That was in episode 45. So if you'd like to go back to that episode, you could go to bigseance.com/45. She also has Higher Intuitions Oracle, Ghosts of Southeast Michigan, and Michigan's Haunted Legends and Lore. Her most recent book that we're going to talk about today is Journey to the Afterlife, Comforting Messages and Lessons from Loved Ones in Spirit. Visit Kristy online at KristyRobinett.com. Hello, Kristy. Good morning.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me on.
I am so excited to have you on again, for real. It's been 3 years.
I was going to say, it feels like years. It actually has been years.
Yeah. It was episode 45. So if anybody wants to go back to Kristy's previous episode, I remember it like it was just last week. And you can find it at bigseance.com/45. It's really easy. And check it out. There's something I have to tell you before we even begin. So the last time we talked on the podcast, I don't know if you remember this, but it was your previous house and you had a squirrel visiting you.
I do remember that. Yes.
And trying to get your attention during the interview.
Yes.
And you made a joke that it must have been a visitor for me.
Yes.
And Well, here's the thing. The night that I was preparing for this interview, it was like, I don't know, 3-4 nights ago, I had been thinking about your squirrel visitor. And I think you saw it actually, but our video doorbell sent me a notification.
Did see it, yes.
That something was at the front door. And I went
Shut the front door.
Yes.
Shut the front door.
And I went to look, and it was this cute looking frog that just hopped in front of the camera, looked right at the camera, and he waves.
Oh my, if that isn't a heaven hello, that's like a hippo dressing up in a tutu and, dancing in the middle of the living room. And you're like, would that be a heaven hello? Yeah, that's definitely a heaven hello. I love that.
I was like, Kristy's sending somebody again.
Well, we have a ton of frogs here too.
Oh, we do too. They're those tree frogs.
A ton of them. Yeah, but that's unusual. We don't normally have the tree frogs. We have the big bullfrogs, the big noisy bullfrogs that I love. But that's amazing.
Do they ring doorbells?
They do not, but they love when I sprinkle them with the hose. They like chase me like a puppy because they love to be watered.
Yeah, and they love when it rains. That's when they start singing around here.
Yeah, they love that. So when they see that I've got the hose, they come running after me. They used to freak me out, and now I'm like, that might be Uncle George. And that could be, no, I'm just joking. It's not really.
You never know.
Bad joke.
Well, besides the frog and the squirrel, my favorite story that you shared with us last time was the one where you talked to the little girl who was seeing ghosts and hiding bananas in her closet.
Yeah, I'm surprised she didn't have fruit fly problem. It really, seriously. Yeah, that is one of my, I tell that story in a lot of my lectures because it shows us so often how we really don't listen. We don't listen to kids. We don't listen to the people around us. We instantaneously start judging, I guess, and I guess for the climate that we're in right now, especially in the United States, I think that that's such a pivotal sort of topic. But I had this little girl, I was doing a book signing. I think it was one of my first books, and it was a ghost book. It was a haunted book. And I was at this bookstore, this metaphysical bookstore, and this mom had brought her little girl in, and the little girl comes up to me and looks at the book, and the book's like haunted this or ghost this, and she's like, is there such thing as ghosts? And I'm like, oh crap, how do I answer that? Because yes, there is, but her mom might get mad at me, and I'm like, I want to answer honestly. And I said, yes, there is, there are such thing as ghosts, but it's not quite like how you might think so. And we kind of had this conversation, and she looked at her mom and she goes, see, I told you so, that man, that's in the closet, he comes to check on me every night. And her mom just looked at me and said, I just never listened to her. But she's like, do ghosts like bananas? And I'm like, I don't think so. And she's like, and her mom's like, that's why you've been leaving bananas in the closet this whole time. So yeah, for some reason she felt like, and it ended up being a grandfather or a great grandfather, but she goes, I have no idea why she was leaving bananas in the closet. And now it completely makes sense. So now at least, if anything, what I did was she will no longer be stealing bananas from her mother's kitchen. She might not believe in ghosts and, or have that conversation, but she will no longer have a banana issue in the closet.
And they'll be saving money.
Exactly. I try to help all the way around the frugal psychic medium. That's what.
So do you ever, I don't know how many years ago this was, but have you ever wondered what that little girl is up to now?
I have. I can still picture her. This was a long time ago. This had to be maybe 15 years ago. So yeah, she'd be like 20 something years old now.
That would be fascinating to connect with her and say, how is life? And do you still connect with spirit? And
I do get a lot of people that come that have met that are younger because I love dealing with kids. Most of the time. I say that with a wink, most of the time. But no, actually, I think especially with the metaphysical and the paranormal, I think kids are actually extremely open and extremely curious. And they sometimes give me a lot of aha moments. I love when I have lectures and parents bring their kids. I keep things very PG, at least I try to, and I don't use foul language or do anything like that. But some of the stories are a little bit more intense, because they're real and true. But I do try to PG it down. But they often have just the most interesting way of looking at the world from both this perspective and the other side. And I love it. But I have had many of them. In fact, years ago, gosh, what did he say it was? He was 16 years old. So it had to be like 15-ish years ago too. He had contacted me because he had a ghost in his house. And he had called me kind of it was during MySpace time. And he had called me kind of out of the blue, and he was having an issue and he was interested. And I talked him through everything and told him I'd help him out and to keep in contact with me. And long story short, he's part of my paranormal team now. So he's always stayed in contact, and his name's Ryan, and he's an amazing, and I still think of him as a kid, because he calls me his sister, but I always say he's like my son, actually. And I just adore him. And so I do try to stay in touch with people who've asked questions or have been curious or have issues. I have a big family base is what I call it. I don't like it called fans, but it's a big family base.
Well, there you go. If we'll call you Banana Girl. If Banana Girl is out there, get a hold of Kristy. We want to hear about it.
Yeah, it was in the Plymouth, Michigan area. So if you remember asking me about the bananas in the closet, contact me.
So I do want to talk about your new book that's getting ready to come out. I've had a chance to get started on a magic before anybody else gets to see it copy. And it's called Journey to the Afterlife, Comforting Messages and Lessons from Loved Ones in Spirit. And it's released on August 8th, right?
It is. And you've got a copy. Did you get a PDF copy?
I got a PDF copy. I call those magic
I have no
coffee.
copy.
Oh,
I have no copy.
Shut up.
Good on you. You must be pretty special.
I am magic.
That's awesome. That is magic. Yeah. No, I really love this book because it's a lot of sensitive and kind of controversial topics related to the afterlife that, this world is often very love and light. And unfortunately, the real world and even the afterlife isn't so love and light. And I wanted it to be positive and comforting, but I wanted to bring up some of the things that we kind of, stuff in the closet, like people who have had suicides in their family and have been raised in the religious household like I was, in a parochial household, we were taught that anyone that committed suicide immediately was a fast pass to hell, or those that had terminations or miscarriages, or what happens if their family member is a murderer, or if their family member is murdered, or, all of these, kind of hairy topics that I sat down and I said, I really want to write about them. And I want to tell the stories from the spirit's perspective. And that's what I did with this book. And I'm really proud of it. It's different than my other books, but I think it still offers some comfort.
In your introduction, you say the line of spirits waiting to get to your help sometimes looks like the line at the DMV. How do you function?
Not well. If you follow me on social media, you should know that already. Since I've moved, almost 2 years, year and a half ago, my dream was always to live in an old farmhouse, and it's always been part of my soul speak. I've always been, preferably I would have lived in Gettysburg because I feel drawn to the Pennsylvania area, but can't do that with my family. So can't go to the South. I can only visit. So I'm in Michigan, and we put the house up for sale. I did one of these fluky things. I'm not a spontaneous person at all, but we put the house up for sale after I was approved for a mortgage, which is interesting because when you're self-employed, that's not so easy, but did it. And the house sold within the matter of days. And this is when the economy was still a little bit upside down. And we went, crap, now we're homeless. We have to find a place to live. And I didn't want to sacrifice where I wanted to move. I didn't want to move and then move again. I wanted, this is where I want to be stuck for the rest of my life, until I can't mow the lawn again.
Forever home.
It honestly was the last. I was done. I wasn't going to sign the papers to the sale of the house. We were just going to stay. This honestly was the very last house I told my realtor I would look at. And I wasn't impressed on paper. Pulled up into the driveway, started crying. And we barely were inside when I said, where do I sign on the dotted line? And it's almost a 90-year-old farmhouse that I don't know if you can hear, but there's people doing work outside on it because it's a 90-year-old farmhouse. But I love it. I love our neighbors. They've been here for years. And because it's peaceful and because I don't have so many people around, I don't get that line quite as intense now. And I think it's because I am more in the country, because I do have some space. And I also, ironically, coincidentally, next to me is an Indian burial ground. That's a very well-known Indian burial ground for this area. And I do believe that they sort of protect me. They protect me from some of the crazier things that I used to get at my old house, where I was kind of in the middle of a suburb city, space. So I think they pretty much put their kibosh on, the busyness of the night, because I've never slept better since I've been at this house.
I've never thought about geography playing a part in that with the medium.
Yeah, I think if I go to a hotel, I don't sleep because of all of the energy that slept there. So I don't sleep well when I'm on vacation. Or I have friends who actually own bed and breakfasts, and they're like, come, you'll get so much rest and it'll be so wonderful. And we're in this beautiful place. And I'm like, you've had 2,000 people sleep in that room. It's a lot of energy for me. It might not be ghosts, but it's energy. So yeah, it's not meant. I think there's only been 3 owners to this home, and I said my only rule was that I didn't want to be too far away from people, because I wanted, if I screamed, a neighbor to hear me. So if Chuck decided to kill me, someone was going to hear. No, just joking. But that was my, if I scream, then I would like someone, they might not come running after me, but they're going to say, yeah, I think I heard a woman scream. And so that was sort of my prerogative with regards to the geography of where we end up moving, because we looked at places that had like acres and acres, and I'm like, this is like Children of the Corn. It's not gonna work. This is just a little bit of Children of the Corn, so it's okay.
It's funny, people will sometimes talking about, oh, I want to go to this haunted hotel and this, and I'm like, man, just even not as a medium, I could tell you, just go to the Motel 6 down the street.
For real. For real. Oh, man. Can I get a high five?
Yes.
I don't know if I've ever told this story before. Chuck and my husband and I had gotten married, and we decided to, honeymoons are supposed to be romantic and you're supposed to go someplace exotic. And we went to Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah.
So exotic Cleveland, tropical Cleveland. There is a reason behind Cleveland. But Cleveland, we both had kids, and any place that we looked at, we were like, oh, we'd really like to take the kids. Oh, we'd really like to take the kids. Oh, we can't do that. We'd like to take the kids. And so we thought, they don't want to go to Cleveland, so we'll go to Cleveland. We wouldn't feel bad not bringing them to Cleveland. And so we started out at Cedar Point in Ohio. It's one of the biggest amusement parks around, honestly. And so we did that, and we stayed at a hotel right outside of Cedar Point on our way to Cleveland. And I did not sleep. I had this is a horrible story. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Let me tell you some more. It's terrible. It's like when something tastes really bad or smells, and you're like, here, taste this. It's terrible. Why am I doing this? But no, so I was awoken by the spirit of a pimp.
Nice.
And he was hookering out his peeps. And it was a horrific thing to view. It really honestly was. And someone had ended up either being murdered or had committed suicide in that room. And so I couldn't sleep, and I went to the front desk, and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "You're going to think that this is nuts, but this is my life. So let me tell you why I woke up and why I'm kind of pacing." And he just stared at me, and he didn't say anything. And I go, "I know, I told you you're going to think I'm crazy." And he goes, "No, we just renovated this space because that's exactly what had happened, and nobody knows it. We kept it out of the newspaper." And so then I stared right back at him, and he goes, "Would you like another room?" And I said, "That'd be nice." And so we moved.
Are you high?
Room.
Yes, I would like another room.
Exactly. But actually, I was like, could I just have a refund? Because probably the room doesn't count. That's why I love people when they're like, "Oh, we got to go to this room and we're going to get the best, because she hung herself here and we're going to get the best paranormal evidence here." I'm like, "Honey, that girl is going to follow you to the next room too. You don't have to be in that one room." I'm a lazy ghost hunter. I'm a lazy paranormal investigator. I'm like, they will find me. Just sit here. I'm comfortable. Just sit here. So the older I get, I'm like, whatever.
And now listeners of our podcast will never stay in another hotel again. They will sleep in their car.
Oh, no, hotels just have a lot of energy. I do tend to bring a piece of selenite, which is a crystal. It's kind of a whitish, cloudy crystal, and that helps to clear a lot of the energy. And I'll bring a little diffuser of oils, and it's less harsher than smudging somebody's hotel room. And I'll use Palo Santo oil or even sage oil, or sometimes cinnamon oil will help as well. And that kind of clears it so that I can sleep a little bit better.
In part 1 of the book, you write about heaven and what some have had near experiences have experienced. What I'm curious to know is, because this is always kind of what I've thought, when we cross over, do we pretty much see and experience what we want or expect to see?
We do. Yeah. The way that the departed has explained heaven to me is pretty much like the things that we've experienced in earth, in our earthly plane, in our physical plane, that have given us joy and have given us our heaven here on earth. And we replicate that in the heavenly plane, because it's our own individual heaven. Some people hate pineapple and some people love pineapple. So just because some people like pineapple, why would heaven be filled with pineapples? It's kind of a stupid analogy, but it's or SpongeBob is there. That's SpongeBob's heaven, is what that is. But it's everybody's adventure is different. And so the adventure in the ethereal is also different. It's not one place. It's not one size fits all for everybody.
And I want it to be that way. I'll start planning now.
Yeah, well, it's true. The experiences that you have here help build your heaven there. And so the spirits, those departed, have often, when I do sessions, explain to people that as we grieve, and it's part of our earthly, physical, kind of selfish thing that we do, that we grieve. And I say that from an individual. I've lost a lot of people. I've recently lost a lot of people in my life, and I'm still grieving. And I know I can hear them. I can see them because I'm a medium. Them telling me, stop doing this because we want to enjoy our vacation. And you being upset about us being on vacation really makes us upset and we can't enjoy our vacation. And I'm like, dang it. I've just ruined your heavens. I'm so sorry. I've done it again. But, it is. So all of the things, if we didn't experience things on this side, how are we supposed to find our heaven on the other side? And I think we lose that a lot. We see some people, and I talk about that in the in-between and the hell, we see so many people that just don't. They just are like waiting to die. They're just waiting. I'm going to have my heaven when I die. Well, you have to kind of build on your experiences here. There's lessons and there's other things, other than just waiting to die, because we were gifted this life to do. And we're not getting the point if we're just waiting if we're just waiting. And then most of the time we miss that boarding pass. We don't even get the boarding pass because we're waiting for too long. One of my favorite, and I think I included it in the book. I don't have the book.
That's so mean.
Isn't that crazy? They do this to me all the time, which is fine. But Ernest Hemingway described his heaven, and he writes, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase, but it's like his heaven would be a big bull ring with him holding like a trout stream outside, and him fishing, and 2 houses and a town. And it's like, yeah, that's not mine. I don't want a bull in my heaven. There's nothing to do with a bull, and I don't really want a trout stream. So but the things that we discover in our lifetime is the things that create our heaven.
I love it. Can you talk about something you call the Houdini question?
My editor tried to take that out. And yeah, he tried to edit it out. And I said, no, I want that left in because it is, one, it's a story that I love. And I use that analogy when I have people in my office all of the time. So Houdini obviously was a magician back in the 20s, and he was very close to his mother, and he ended up marrying, and his mom was a little bit jealous because they were so close. They really had a close bond, Houdini and his mom. And so he really, as a magician, really, really wanted to kind of believe in the other side. And in the 20s was the spiritualist sort of era where there had been so much death in the wars that people were really looking for a belief in the afterlife as well. And so because he was a magician, magicians, what do? They fool us, right? Like they create these illusions that make us believe what's there is there, or what isn't there isn't there. And so he was really, really upset with mediums, and he had witnessed so much fraud in the spiritualist community, and he was just really, really tired of it. So what he did with his mom is they kind of had a code word. If you pass, this is the word that a medium is going to say to me. And if I pass, this is the word that I'm going to say to the medium to give to you. And they kind of had this afterlife code. And he did it with his wife, Bess, as well. And they set up that code word from beyond. So Houdini spent a lot of his career after his mother's passing focused on exposing these so-called vultures to the bereaved. And he would go to seances, and he would do these table tipping, and he would go to readings, and he would go in disguise, and then he would call them out in the middle of the act because they would always be like, and your mom is here. And he'd be like, well, what does she have to say? And well, she loves you, and she'll always be with, or whatever. And he never got the word. He never, or he said he didn't. There's a couple books that says that he did, and he didn't want to believe. He was so cynical by that time that he didn't want to believe. So I just said the word. So the word that he was looking for from the medium was believe. And he just didn't want to believe. So when you have somebody so cynical at that, so he ended up joining a panel, and I think it was put together by the Scientific American magazine, something like that, that offered a reward for any medium that could prove that their psychic gifts were true and genuine. And in every city that he went to, he would offer this amount of money to prove this so-called gift. And again, it never ended up, happening. So I end up getting all of these people, and some are believers and some are cynics. And I'm sure that anyone in this industry has this as well, but people who will come to me and say, well, if my dad is really here, he's going to tell me what him and I did in 1965, on the 4th of July, or whatever. And it doesn't really work that way. So I call it the Houdini, factor, because it's not like snap your fingers and produce the sign or a birth date or a word. And I wish it was. I wish it worked that way, but they don't have lungs on the other side. And the things that might matter to you in this world don't necessarily matter to them on the other side. And I try to give as much validating information. So I call it the Houdini factor.
I love it. Something similar. My mother and I have always had, kind of an arrangement, and I tell her to be looking out for the bedside table, because I'm going to really be messing with everything having to do with that bedside table. And that's how she's going to know.
I love it. And they do. And a lot of times, even like when they're like, well, what is that specific thing that Dad and I have together, or Mom and I have together? A lot of times they're receiving their messages through that, or they're like, the bedside table is being messed with, but it doesn't take a medium to have to be in on that secret, to be a validating point. Interestingly enough, to kind of go further into this realm with it, the James Randi Association came specifically from this Houdini Scientific American Magazine reward. So it's a direct, and James Randi was also a magician as well. And now I don't know if you know who is the head of it now. Do you know who the head of it is now?
I don't think I do.
So it's Penn and Teller.
Oh, that's right. I do remember hearing that. But they're not even doing it anymore, right? Didn't they just kind of shut it down?
I think it's still kind of out there, but I don't think it's as prevalent. When I first started in this industry, I would always get, well, if you're true and real, you'll go after the James Randi Association. And they actually contacted me a couple times, and I said, let's do it. I said, but whatever I give you, you are not going to take. There's no scientific. I can't snap my fingers and create what you want in your head, what you would think as scientific. Science is, it's not black and white. It's just not. And they were trying to make it so black and white. Kind of a side note is we went to Vegas several years ago, and I really wanted to see Penn and Teller, because I really do. And some of these mentalists and these illusionists, I look at them and I'm like, I have no idea how they're doing it. I might talk to those on the other side, but I have no clue how they're doing what they're doing. And I know it's a trick. But so we spent a lot of money. They're very expensive to go see. And we sat down, and we were with our friends Mikey and Yanni, and we sit down, and the first thing, I am not even joking, the first thing that comes out of Penn's mouth is a whole like 10-15 minute rant on how all psychics and mediums are horrible and they deserve to be in jail.
Oh my gosh.
And Chuck looked at me and said, does he know that you're here? And I'm like, I am nobody. I'm nobody. He's not going to know who I am or if I'm here or not. And I don't know why he would do it. I paid money to see him, why he would do it. And he didn't even have like an act to follow with it. He just went on this huge tirade with regards to it. And so my friends looked at me and said, do you want to leave? They were really afraid that I was offended. And I'm like, hey, I paid money. I want to see what's going on. But I was in tears, because I do believe that there's an awful lot of frauds, but I think there's frauds in every sector.
Absolutely.
And I think he probably more than likely had met a lot of the frauds and those that are on television. I'm not saying that they're not real, but I've done a lot of TV. I've seen the editing. I've walked away from television because I wouldn't do the editing. And they have too. Penn and Teller have also. We met them after the show. They're both very lovely. They're both atheist. So the belief, you have to almost believe in something in order to believe in this world, so they don't believe. They just don't believe. And so Teller was very nice. He actually talked, and he was very kind. Penn had a little bit of a darkness around him, a little bit, and that could have been the cynicism as well. I'm sure he's a very nice person. And we got pictures with them and everything, and I stuck around, but that's that whole Houdini factor. And I think that it's kind of passed along as the baton's passed along from the magicians.
Yeah. I've always heard that, they were not at all friendly toward the medium
side of things. And I do think that, when you're so cynical about things, and I think I can probably draw from experience in my life trying to experiment with all this spirit communication stuff, I have a really healthy sense of skeptic, brain syndrome or whatever you want to call it. Right. And I think I shut it down. So by doing that, they're also kind of shutting down the mediums that they're testing, I think maybe.
What's sad is that if you don't have to believe. I'm ironically, because I also know my peers and I know a lot of people in this industry, I also have seen the frauds, and I don't call them out because it's not up to me. I do believe in another side. I don't believe that we're being judged in that way, that maybe in the biblical sense. But I think that we do have that karmic, connection. And it's not up to me to call anybody out. It's not up to me. Now, I will defend, I will defend my belief. But if you don't believe in what I believe, I'm not going to force it down anybody's throat. I think that that's wrong as well. We're in such a weird space, because it's almost like you have to apologize before you say something that you believe in. And especially in this realm as well, it's, I don't know, it's back to the Salem witch trials, but it's in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
I agree. It's an awkward time.
If you're black or purple or straight or gay or, love dogs, I hate cats. I don't know. I'm so confused every day. I put anything on social media. I'm like, who's going to find fault with what I just said? And I do. I'll get things from people that will be like, you put too much positive stuff out. And then I'll get something that says, you put something negative out. How dare you? And it's like, there's no pleasing anybody. And I have found that in my own, to sort of be, and this goes back to the heaven thing, to be okay with yourself. You have to kind of just focus on yourself. You can't get, you can't get pulled into all of these other directions and go down to that Alice in Wonderland, crazy rabbit hole. You can't do that, because if you do, then you actually start doubting a lot of yourself, and your heaven then becomes a lot of doubt.
Well, speaking of being skeptic and believing or not believing and judging and this crazy climate we're in now, sometimes people will accuse someone of being a new soul or an old soul, and you have a great chapter in your book on old souls and new souls. And I think a lot of us like to believe that we're old souls. But how would we know if we were a new soul? And is that like insulting to?
No.
Should you be sad if you're a new soul?
Rah. Yeah, no, it's so interesting. And I thank you for saying that you love this chapter. I loved writing this chapter, because even one of the examples that I utilized was gender traits, and again, it's something that is sort of pivotal in this climate that we have. But why I love my job so much is because I go to my office, and the people that I deal with, most of the time I love them, but I love dealing with the other side, because there's no prejudice. To kind of just lay it out there. They don't care. They don't care what you look like. They don't care what you identify with. And I don't want to mean like they don't care, but it doesn't create the voice of who you really truly are, the depth of who your soul is. And it upsets me so much, because then I have to leave my office and I have to leave that protection of heaven that doesn't really care and go and read the media or social media or see all of the crazy, stuff that's kind of being put out that isn't anything to do with what is, real and true. But no, so going back to sorry, you'll probably have to edit my rambling out. Sorry.
No, I love rambling.
But going back to, as being a new soul, something that is a negative, it's absolutely not. We need that balance. in our life. So we need the old souls and we need the new souls. And the new souls are typically extremely curious, and they're sort of our spontaneous ones. They're the ones that, a lot of times will push boundaries, and they are, the old souls are a lot like the teachers, and the new souls are the students. So we have to have that balance of new and old. And I love, because I've had people in my office and they're like, I'm definitely not an old soul. I'm a new soul. And I'm always really shocked to hear that, because like you said, old soul feels like you're something special, right?
Right.
I'm an old soul. I'm wise.
Been
I know
there,
things.
done that.
Yeah, whatever. New souls is like, yeah, you're just a baby. Like Rugrats, you're just a baby. So, and it's really, we get a lot of depth from both of it. And I thought it was really important that I kind of, put the different traits. So can I list some of the traits of old?
Please
and some
do.
of the traits from the new? So some of the traits from the old is being an introvert. They'd rather spend time with just their close circle of friends rather than with a bunch of people. A lot of them love history. History is something that makes them they're fascinated with, or a certain era or certain music or certain clothing, even. They just are connected with that. And some of them, they learn differently. I know that I did. I know that I'm an old soul. Sometimes I wish I had new soul traits, though, because that old soul does sort of stick you into that, get off my lawn, type of Clint Eastwood, mode of, being a little bit more cranky. Old souls love deeply. They fall harder. They wear their heart on their shoulders. They learn differently. And like I said, they're the advisors. They're the teachers. Old souls tend to be very emotional and sensitive, and they don't like drama. They like the quiet. They're the givers. They're the ones that, give of themselves maybe too much. And I always say it's sort of like the 10-step program to an empath or an old soul. And it's, if you love nature, if you love animals, if you love kids, you're an old soul. It's kind of like a stand-up routine, that you can kind of do. But old souls drink from the wisdom of the past, and they try to help the present and the future with some of that content. New soul. So you feel like you're an old soul then?
I'm just saying, I think we all want to believe that we're an old soul. I know that I have a lot of those traits, but I also tend to be kind of, I'm going to admit this now.
Wow.
I tend to be very selfish with my giving a little bit and my energy.
Okay.
I'm kind of a recluse.
Okay.
In training, I've always said that. So I see kind of traits on both lists.
On both ends?
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of the old souls are reincarnated. So that's really what that means, is that they've lived lifetimes before and they come into this world. We get a choice. I don't know why. I chose to do this again. What's my problem? But we choose again, to live another lifetime or to live other lifetimes. So new souls, it's a clean slate. They've never been reincarnated before. They draw their knowledge and their wisdom from kind of this lifetime. They tend to be the highly competitive ones. They're the ones that want money. They want success. They're the opinionated ones. They are the ones that are a little bit concerned with their looks, or looking at their birthday number, not loving that. They're the adventurers, and they tend to be very attracted to old souls. So a lot of times we have the old souls and the new souls, and they become a couple because it's that balance of spontaneous and that I did not. I married an old soul. I'm an old soul. He's a little bit more adventurous. So it doesn't mean like it's clear cut, like, oh, you can't be adventurous if you're an old soul. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It's just a different way. And a lot of times you can look at somebody and say they're a new soul or they're an old soul. If even babies, I've had a lot of, grandparents say that, they knew immediately that their grandchild was a new soul or an old soul and that it fit. too.
You mentioned a little while ago the gender traits, but you also said that personality traits are often the same from lifetime to lifetime.
It's true. Yeah. So you don't necessarily have to be, if you were a male in a past life, you don't necessarily become male in this lifetime. You can become female or vice versa. And sometimes we identify not necessarily with the outward gender, but the inward gender. And I saw something, I don't even know if I should be bringing this up. There's a politician that is in the Michigan area that's running for governor. And I did this in a non-political way, but everything becomes political, right? So she uses the D word in her campaign slogan. And I was just really curious because the word damn to me was always considered a swear word.
I remember you mentioning this on Facebook.
Yeah. And so I was curious what other people thought, not in a political way, but just in the, should this content be, because I can't imagine it's being played like every other commercial. So it's, you got kids in the daytime, watching, whatever, Judge Judy or whatever, and it's every other, word. And yes, we have the opportunity to shut the TV off. And I was just curious what other people thought. I was like, I'm not a prude. However, I was just curious. And someone said, boy, I don't really like her because she's macho. And I thought, that is an interesting way to describe somebody, and like, is it derogatory? Is it insulting? isn't it interesting how and again, I try to look at it that's that soul. So because she's a woman and because she's a little bit assertive, and I don't even think it was the D word. It's just the way that who she is. That is, her soul is a little bit macho. So some people might, from a medium perspective, I might go, well, she might have actually been a man in a past life, and she's bringing forth that emotional content into this lifetime. And she's in a male's world, the political, aspect, it still is gender biased, that way. But I thought a lot of people took that as an insult, and I'm not judging, whether she meant it insulting or not, but have we ever met somebody who was feminine or ultra, testosterone driven, and whatever genitalia you have, it doesn't equate to who you are. Our personalities, though, from our past come forward into these other lifetimes. So it's just interesting that we're in this judgmental state of mind right now, and instead of seeing the soul, we kind of define one another on those personality traits. Did that make any sense? I'm hoping that did.
It does make sense. We all have feminine and masculine energy, and I think it probably shifts along a scale from lifetime to lifetime, and sometimes we lean more one direction that is not necessarily what the world wants you to be,
Well, it's true, and screw the world, because it's the other world that is like, screw the world, just keep creating your heaven here on earth, keep really honestly, keep doing that. And my husband always says, he must have been a female in a past because he loves to design. Now, is that gender biased? It is. That's stupid. You can have a man that likes to design. He likes to color his hair crazy colors, and he loves clothes. But
I love his crazy colors. Bring it.
But if you were to put that on a dating site, they'd be like, "What's wrong with this guy?" Right? Somehow I saw through all that when I met him and went, I like the quirkiness. And so our personality, and we're supposed to grow. We're not supposed to grow out of our personality, but we're supposed to learn through that personality through lifetime to lifetime. So if we're shy, we're supposed to learn how to be stronger. If we're too strong, we're supposed to learn how to be a little bit, check that in a little bit, or how do we use that strength, in different ways. So it's always lessons. We're always given lessons, and we got to focus a little bit more on ourselves rather than the people around us.
Now, I want people to know that we've really barely touched on this book, but since we have talked about heaven and creating your heaven, I want to talk about the section that you have on hell. That's maybe not really that
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 wasn't
hellish.
too scary.
I don't know. But I love that you have a chapter called What the Hell?
What the hell?
Is hell really a thing?
Well, it's funny because I really wanted the book to be called Heaven, Hell, and In Between. And I fought up and down for that title instead of Journey to the Afterlife. I fought up and down for that title. And they finally had to give me statistics that anybody that has a book with hell in it, it does not do well.
Oh, wow.
And so I went, oh, okay, I will change it to Journey to the
Works for me.
To the Afterlife. It works for me. But so I still refer to the book as Heaven, Hell, and In Between. And the hell part, again, it's the balance. And is there really a hell? Just like we create our heaven, we can create our hell as well. And so I give a lot of examples. I had my own kind of scary thing that sort of set me into why I do what I do. I grew up in Detroit. Unlike Eminem and Kid Rock, I actually did grow up in Detroit. So they grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, but I grew up in Detroit and, we had a horribly haunted house that was very negative and especially scary. And you'll actually for the first time hear the story of that in the book. Because I've never spoken of it and I really wasn't going to add it. And my editor's like, I really think that you need to kind of tell them your childhood experience. And so is hell a place? Just like heaven isn't a place, I don't think that hell is a place. I'm kind of a geek. I don't know if probably not because I'm pretty geeky. But have you ever watched The Flash? Have you ever watched the show The Flash or the comic books? Okay. So I love the way that they explain, because believe it or not, those of you who are like, really, she follows comic books? The Flash actually is a forensic scientist. And he becomes this metahuman by an experiment that was done in a lab. And so he becomes the fastest man alive. But with it, he realizes that because of the speed, there's a very physical, from a physics standpoint in the show and in the comic books, but from his speed, he can travel into different timelines, into different dimensions that have, like, he'll have himself in the other timeline. And there will be a bad one of him and a good one of him. And, so it kind of I know that sounds a little bit quirky, but I often see the different sides, these different hells and these different heavens and these different in-betweens, very similarly to the way that they describe it in the comic book Flash, is that there's different timelines, and it's part of the whole metaphysics of it all. It's part of the physics of the energy that you can't kill it. You can just transfer it. And so it becomes transferred into these different dimensions that we sometimes get glimpses in because we're aligned just right. So the hell, I'm going to hopefully my one editor doesn't listen to this. So in the book, I describe my experience that was really frightening. And so I get a lot of people that will call me on their frightening experiences to assist with them, or they'll want to tune into a person that they had, grown up with that might have been a really bad person, such as a murderer or a rapist or a molester or whatever. And so in the book, and I can't remember how I put it, but it was like, I don't dial that number to hell. I kind of had put it that way. And he had put a note, my one editor is like, so do you still have that number? And I was like, like a real phone number to hell? No, there's no real phone number. I'm just meaning like I don't dial into that number, into that dimension, into that energy. And he's like, but do you have the phone number?
Oh my
and I'm like,
God.
You are really cute. You are adorable. I love you. And I'm like, nope, I lost it. I'm not sure where it is anymore. It was in my old phone. I don't know how do you.
That is weird.
But yeah. So you might want to edit that one out. But no, I thought it was really cute because it's like I truly don't dial into that energy. I don't want to dial into that energy. Some people are demonologists. I don't want that gig.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why anybody would feel comfortable even studying it all day and talking about it. And I certainly don't, bring it up too much.
Well, that was one of the reasons that our house became so insanely haunted. My dad was a deacon for the Lutheran church, and he was studying demons. And he brought in all of these books and started to kind of open these different portals of energy that liked that darkness. They liked that somebody was studying that darkness, and they fed off of it. And it became, and if you read Forevermore, or if any of your listeners read Forevermore, they would understand Edgar Allan Poe at that time became present as a spirit guide of mine. And it became so obvious as I aged why he became a guide, not just to protect me, but because he had known that darkness himself. And so he kind of could temper the darkness that was happening in the household. And it was a really frightening experience. I always say, if you ever saw or you read Amityville Horror, multiply that by a ton, because that was my house. It
Wow.
was extremely frightening. And I wrote about, some of the other experiences that I had with some other frightening, hellish, type of energy. But I definitely I've been asked to go to prisons to do readings, to do spiritual counseling. I've been invited to mental hospitals to do, and I just feel like, as much as I would love to help them, I feel like it's almost a setup for me. And I don't think that, I think I'm spiritually strong enough, but it just scares me. And if I'm scared, I know that I'm not good for that.
Well, clearly you have come out of that experience. And like, I can tell you, the very first time I ever heard you, again, it was on Jim Harold's Paranormal Podcast years ago. And I just absolutely resonated with you and loved that you were just so friendly and bubbly and like just sitting in a car and chatting with somebody who's a friend. And that's the energy that I get from you. So it was kind of shocking.
Not hellish.
It was shocking to me to hear that you had such an experience growing up. Yeah,
well, and again, like, not to repeat it a million times, but there's lessons in life, and I think that was a lesson in my lifetime, is to assist, but not to be. I've witnessed exorcisms that were frightening, even to think of it right now. Completely frightening for anyone, for Penn or Teller to say, Penn to think that none of this, exists. Go to an actual exorcism, because you will see no magic at all. You will definitely, and I wouldn't want anybody to do that, but extremely frightening. And so I know that there's a darker place. Do I want to go to it? Nope. Do I want to, delve into it in my daily, life? Nope, I don't. But I thought it was really important to mention and I did it tongue in cheek, like my chapters, where, it's always, what I think it's always Monday's always hell, or something like that. I try to do things a little bit more tongue in cheek, but there is a serious, context with it.
So will you please share the creepy experience you had on Mackinac Island?
Oh, Mackinac. That gives me goosebumps still. Oh my gosh, my Mackinac. So I will. Only because I love you. That's the only reason why I'm doing this, is because I love you. So I was doing an event on Mackinac Island that I was really excited about. And Mackinac Island, for those of you that don't know, it's a pretty small island in northern Michigan. very well known, very historical. There had actually been wars there. It's got a lot of history to it. A lot of paranormal people will go there. And in the 1980 film Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour took place there. And we were actually going to be investigating the theater that they had filmed in, which is extremely haunted. I had my own share of paranormal occurrences on Mackinac, but never one like I had this October. And I had brought out my ghost seekers with me. It was right around Halloween. We were doing ghost walks and investigations, and we decided we kind of had a little bit of a break, so we went into the town, and I was with my son Connor and my husband Chuck and our friends, and we were going to go get something to eat. We're kind of browsing the shops and going to go get something to eat. And everybody was familiar. Everyone knew one another. Everyone was, greeting one another on the roads. And it was just a very kind of nice place. You're got an island, you're pretty much to yourself, because it was kind of a quiet time with everyone. How awesome is that? It was pretty cool. And it's a vehicle island as well. So it's horses. So you get around by horse pretty much, or you walk or by bike. And so I was looking for a purse of all things, and I turned around and I realized that everybody had left me. We were talking, I was with my friends, and everyone had disappeared. And the busy street, even though, it was not as busy, it was still busy and there were people there, had emptied. There was absolutely nobody in the streets. And I went to go get my phone out of my purse, and I felt like someone was watching me. And I turned around, and there was a child who was about 10-ish years old, and he was wearing a wool coat and a matching cap, like a paperboy cap.
Yeah.
And there was nobody else there. And he said, "How are you today, ma'am?" And I thought, is this kid really talking to me? Like, what? But I felt like I was bound to the ground. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I was just in this Zoom kind of moment, like in this child's energy. And not only was the way he dressed sort of interesting, but his eyes were hypnotic, and they were all black. And so it's not the outward. It wasn't like he had black eyes, but inside, like his cornea, everything was black.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to step away from him. I'm going to start crying even telling the story. Isn't that stupid? I tried to step away from him, and I couldn't. I was like glued to the ground. And so I replied in, "I'm fine," but it came out in more like a hush, like a whisper. And the boy continued to stare at me, and I'll never forget what he said. So he just continued to stare at me, and he never changed his facial expressions. It was just very serious. And he said, "Remember, they'll always find you. There's no hiding from your past." And it was then that he kind of smiled at me. And then he ran up the street in the direction of where our hotel was. And so I was like in this crazy haze. And in the middle of the street, I heard Chuck call my name, and I was just stunned because I did not know what had happened. So of course, I'm on this island with my ghost, peep. So of course I shared my experience, and they're like, "Well, of course that was a BE, C. That was a black-eyed child. That was a black-eyed kid." And black-eyed people, or sometimes called black-eyed children, or BEKs, are classified as sort of young people, often children with eyes that are solid black. There's no notable like pupil or iris or cornea or anything like that. They tend to have tinted bluish, kind of like corpse-like skin. I didn't notice that because he was completely covered, and it was a warm day. So we were like in shorts and a t-shirt, and he was in a wool coat. They tend to be very confident. There's a confusion off of like what they are, if they're an alien, if they're a non-entity, if they're a demon. Some people say they're very vampiric, like they can get into your head, and if you invite them into your life or into your house, they kind of soul suck. And to this day, I have no idea why he kind of came into my life other than me having the experience.
That is, gives me goosebumps too. I don't think we've ever brought up in 4 years black-eyed kids yet. You know, it's an interesting phenomena, and I think most people report this experience either at their front door, or the weird thing is a lot of people will experience it at their car, like when they're going to a car.
Yes, because I have had another experience with several of them in a car, believe it or not, at a 7-Eleven.
Wow.
But they weren't there for me. They were there for somebody else. I just was a witness to it. And it is one of those, you know, so-called legends that I've never really studied, and even writing my experience down, I wasn't sure even where I was going with it, you know, and I really, it kind of ends abruptly because I just like not wanting to open my household, you know, to researching demons and such. It's a very similar feeling. And so I had a friend who is a curator who deals with kind of that darkness, and he has since passed away, but he had told me before he passed that I needed to be really, really careful, because even though I try to deal more with the light, he was like, hell is around us and it's not a place, and it tries to bring us in, and the darker you are, the easier that it can creep in, and the more that you have to keep that brightness and that light around. And, you know, and I always, like I said, even to him, I always say, you know, I've lost the phone number to hell. He said, just break the phone altogether, because heaven can find you and hell will have a harder time. And I've always remembered those words from my friend Nick. And I do believe that is, you know, his real name is used differently in the story, but I do believe that it's frightening, and we get ourselves involved in this darkness. And I'm not just talking about studies of demons, but even the negativity of life all of the time, when we should be instead maybe focusing a little bit more lightness in our life and living our heaven here and having those experiences here. It's a choice. We're always given a choice.
Thank you for sharing that, because I just thought that was one of the it's a really interesting story from your book that is, you know, it's not, you're not afraid to kind of go there a little bit, you know, your book.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
It's just a tiny bit. It does. It really, honestly, it's still, I can still picture him and that episode like it was this morning. It's so, and it's something that I have kept very, I wrap myself in the light every morning and every night. And that is an experience I continue to wrap in the light.
I love you, Kristy Robinett.
I love you back.
So what's coming up for you in the future other than this book that people can pre-order? What's going on in Kristy Robinett world? Where do people find you?
You could find me at KristyRobinett.com, and all my books are on Amazon. I'm working on a book on astrology right now that I'm excited for, because it's not all the scientific charts and kind of all the stuff that the astrologers, you know, put out there that you're like, what are you talking about? I try to put it in layman's terms. And I'll have a book out on just empaths. So how to deal with this crazy world when this crazy crowded world, you know, that we're living in, when we feel everything, and kind of what to do with that. So I've got 2 more books, and my daughter and I are working on a fiction series that I'm really excited for.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've been contacted by several different networks to turn in some of these other books, some of the stories in the books into like little stories off of kind of like the girly stories, little paranormal romance stories with some of them. And so we're in talks with them, and I'm really excited for the future.
You rock.
Thank you. You do too.
Thank you to the following super paranerds who support the show at patreon.com/Big Seance. Bianca Roth, Kim Robb, Jim Budd, David Rubenstein, Josiel Lorenzo, Amy Park Gedicke, and Susan Davey. My supporters at the Parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/Parlor guests, are Bruce Williams, Christopher Kohler, Lana and John of Carbon Lilies, Denise Sia, Anna Frias, Norman and Linda Keller, and Karen Prine. Thanks for always rocking, everybody. In 2 weeks, I finally sit down in the Parlor with Slade Robertson of Shift Your Spirits. It'll be awesome.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com.
You can find and subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and just about anywhere podcasts are found.
Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.
Your Paranerd hashtag for today is a long one, but super easy. It's the name of Kristy's book, Journey to the Afterlife. All one word. So hashtag Journey to the Afterlife. So tag me at Big Seance, tag Kristy at Kristy Robinett, and use the Paranerd hashtag, Journey to the Afterlife.